Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on slashing salt, introducing better winter road salt management practices in your community. It's funny that we're talking about winter in August, but to quote Game of Thrones, winter is coming. So my name is Maria Elena Lima. I'm the River Science Program Manager at the Charles River Watershed Association. For your some brief housekeeping, we are recording. Um, and our communications manager, Carly, will be monitoring the chat. So I encourage everyone to put any questions you have in your chat, and we'll get to them in the end. There is also time for a discussion to get more feedback from you all, because I know we have some municipal staff on the call, and we'd love to get more feedback about what you're doing, what you think might work best, how CRWA can advocate and help municipalities get to where we want to be on this shared goal. So I do want to preface that CRWA does not apply road salt as part of our organization. We've been learning a lot since starting our chloride monitoring program. I personally am not an expert in this topic, but I have been learning more about it as it's my master's research focus is on road salt impacts on freshwater ecosystems. So I really can't um, kind of relay how important this time is to learn from each other from each other and discuss how we can work together to make an impact on this issue. Um, there we go. So just to get all of us on the same page, a little bit about the Charles River watershed. So the watershed is 308 square miles in area. It focuses on the Charles River, which flows 80 miles from Echo Lake Dam in Hopkinton to the Boston Harbor. The watershed itself encompasses 35 cities and towns and is home to over 1 million people. I'd also like to take a moment for a brief land and water acknowledgement. We humbly recognize the Massachusetts, Wampanoag, and Nipmuc nations as the original stewards of the land on which we work and honor their enduring role as caretakers of this territory. We are committed to building respectful partnerships with Indigenous communities throughout our watershed, seeking to learn from, uplift, and support their relationship with the Charles River, or the Kennebequen is the Indigenous name for it, and their visions for its future. Okay, so just to make sure that everyone's on the same page about this topic. So during the winter in New England and other parts of the world where we have below freezing temperatures, we apply rock salt or road salt, which is more technically called sodium chloride, as well as other de-icers on impervious surfaces to avoid ice and snow-related accidents for public safety reasons. So I'm sure we're all familiar with this, living in Massachusetts. But the big concern is that road salt usage has exploded in the US. So in 1954, there was reported 1 million tons of road salt used in the US during the winter months. And if you look at the graphic on the bottom right, that shows the metric tons of sodium chloride or road salt used in the US from 1965 to 2017. So you go from 1975 is like 8 million metric tons to 2017 was over 20 million metric tons. And so the US uses roughly 15 to 32 million metric tons of winter road salt yearly, depending on the severity of the winter. So like the number of storms we've had, whether it's a warmer winter or a colder winter. And so depending on multiple factors, municipality managed roads use between 100 to 500 pounds of road salt per lane per mile every snowfall. So it is a problem because the use of it has increased significantly. So who's using all the salt? Barack in 2008 did a study of where road salt is being used predominantly. And so the majority of it was on parking lots, municipal roads. And there was a caveat that like most parking lots are often serviced by private contractors, not necessarily the municipal staff that work for that town. And that'll play into the whole story a little later on. So how does road salt get into our waterways? A lot of roads actually cross streams. And so whenever road salt is exposed to liquid, when you have a sunny day after a storm event that starts to melt the snow, and it starts to kind of carry the road salt um, into our streams. Um, and there are also unintentional sources where, there's just too much. There's some photos here of they're literally like applied right at the storm basin, the catch basin. And so it would be very easy for road salt to just to just fall into this catch basin grate and then move in with the rest of the stormwater system, because most stormwater systems in Massachusetts end up in our local waterways, like the Charles River. Okay, so the reason Massachusetts specifically started monitoring for chloride and road salt usage was because of a concern of groundwater contamination to drinking water. So water with more than 20 milligrams per liter of salt or chloride is considered unhealthy for individuals on a low sodium diet. So there is a big public health impact and public health um, kind of concern around if road salt is contaminating our drinking water, then we are um, secretly drinking, like having more sodium, intaking more sodium, and that affects our health. The other big reason that it's a more of a public health concern is because road salt can actually chemically burn dogs' paws, and ingesting road salt can lead to severe health complications. So that's specific to humans and pets, like more like our side of impacts. But there are a lot of other impacts that road salt has, unfortunately. So the reason that CRWA got involved in monitoring chloride was because of the concern of contamination for freshwater organisms like fish and the bugs that these fish eat. So freshwater organisms evolved over time in low salinity environments. So when the water gets too salty, they only have so much ability to adapt to this changing environment. And so a lot of the time, it's just too toxic for them, and they die off because they just aren't used to this high salinity environment. A couple key things. So it's actually really easy for fresh water to be contaminated with salt. So it only takes 1 teaspoon of road salt to permanently salinate 5 gallons of water. So that kind of gives you a sense of scale. The other big thing specific to aquatic organisms is that salt can cause dead zones where oxygen's not dissolved in the waterway, and so it can lead to fish kills as well as mortality of other aquatic organisms in our streams. Um, Another key thing that we learned in this research is that increased salinity can actually aid the growth of toxic algal blooms, which is already a public health concern in the Charles because we do have cyanobacteria blooms in the Charles River and other parts of our watershed. And these algal blooms create toxins that could be harmful to humans and pets. So there's a whole another layer of public health concern with algal blooms, not not even just taking salty water into account. And then the other big one that I think most people have seen over time is just how road salt corrodes metal and other aspects of our built infrastructure. So, every year we have to, fix the potholes that the road salt and our usage of it has on our roads, on our bridges. So it is a big aspect of like maintenance that we have to do each year or every few years with the use of road salt. And then the other big point, big kind of aspect of this is that climate change is affecting how much road salt is being used. So when you have a big storm and then the next day it's 40 degrees where everything starts to melt, um, you have a lot more water. And so usually you like applicators will need to reapply because at nighttime it gets below freezing again. So that basically leads to using more salt, more money because salt is expensive. So we'll talk a little bit later, but using salt alternatives such as brine will help with minimizing the amount of overall salt used in our on our roads and like eventually going into our roadways. Okay, so um, one last bit of context before we get into more of our chloride monitoring program results. So as I mentioned, CRWA started monitoring for chloride. So we began in 2022. And so basically what we um, do is that we deploy a conductivity logger both upstream and downstream of a major road crossing. And these loggers record conductivity and temperature every 15 minutes during the winter and the summer. And so each year we get um, thousands of data points from each stream. And so the way that it works is that so we collect conductivity, which is a measure of the ability to pass an electrical current in any medium. In our case, we're using water. So that's what the loggers collect, conductivity. Then there is a special program that we use that comes with the loggers that converts conductivity to specific conductance, which is basically conductivity at 25 degrees Celsius. So it's not that different. It's just kind of a main temperature point because temperature has a big impact on conductivity, on the ability to pass electrical currents in a medium. And so what we do is using the specific conductance in results, we plug that into a special formula that the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection created to give you chloride. And so we can convert the conductivity to chloride. And so the way that we use it in terms of the big picture of like is this water body impaired or is it high for chloride is connecting it to the US EPA chloride criteria. So back in 1988, the US EPA put out thresholds basically saying if a water body has more than X amount of chloride in it, it is impaired for chloride. So for EPA, for chloride, there's actually two criteria. So one is acute, And so basically over 1 hour of like data, if you have an average above 860 milligrams per liter of chloride, then that water body would be considered impaired. The other criteria focuses on chronic. So chronic is more like long term. And so you're looking at a 4 day average. So if over 4 days, on average, it's above 230 milligrams per liter of chloride, then it is impaired for chloride. If it's below any of those thresholds, then it's per US EPA's criteria, safe for aquatic organisms or acceptable. So that's kind of important context for when we get into the results that we've been collecting. Okay, so I want to take some time. So we've been monitoring various streams throughout the last 4 years, and so I want to just focus on a couple that are have interesting results, basically. So case study one is Mine Brook in Franklin, and so Mine Brook. The study design was upstream and downstream of I-495 as the major road crossing. So on this map here, you have the upstream and the downstream sites in the red triangles. And then this first figure is looking at conductivity in the summer. So this is generally how conductivity behaves with precipitation. So the upstream site is in the light blue and the downstream site is in the dark blue. And we keep that color scheme throughout the entire presentation for ease, where light blue is upstream and dark blue is downstream. So basically, what you're seeing is, and then the green lines are precipitation events. So basically, the way that conductivity behaves in the summer is that there's like a baseline. And then when you have a rain event, so for example, September 6th is a great example. When you have a rain event, the conductivity drops suddenly. And then it kind of climbs back up to its baseline. And then again, when there's a rain event, it drops back down. So that's generally how conductivity behaves in the summer. Is you have a certain amount of volume of water and with a certain amount of salinity, and then when it rains, it kind of dilutes it until it gets back to its baseline. Okay. And then this is looking at conductivity in the winter. So the trend is kind of the opposite, which makes sense. So in the winter, when you have a snow event, in this case, because it's winter, conductivity spikes. And so you have a lot of examples. These were all pretty major storms that we had. And so that kind of indicates that road salts are entering the stream as runoff. There is a caveat that there is like a specific max where if you get that much precipitation, then it kind of you're not getting like it's kind of like the first flush where if you get enough water, it kind of cancels out whatever road salt is coming in to a certain extent because there's not like a continuous amount of road salt being applied for the most part. So that's where you get specifically in Mine Brook when you got more than 2 inches of precipitation, then it kind of flushed out the system. Okay, and now we're looking at chloride. So we've converted the conductivity to chloride with the handy formula we get from Mass DEP. And so the pattern generally is that downstream is always higher than upstream. And so this is just a brief table showing the mean chloride levels for that's like every single data point we got that was a mean. So upstream's 156, downstream's 179 higher. Um, and so this is for summer specifically. Um, and so the next part, and this is where the EPA chloride criteria comes in. Okay, so you've got a 1 hour and a 4 day moving average. So the 1 hour is the light blue. So that corresponds with the red line. So basically, the red line is the 860 milligrams per liter. So the light blue line has to pass the red line for it to be a acute impairment or exceedance. And then the dark blue line corresponds with the 4 day average. And this yellow-orange line corresponds with the um, chronic criteria of 230 milligrams per liter. So we're looking at summer. And so um, for the upstream site on Mine Brook, there were no chloride exceedances because the light blue line didn't go over the red, and the dark blue line didn't go over the orange either. Now you look at the downstream site, and you do have some chronic exceedances because you have some cases where the dark blue line goes over the 230 milligram per liter threshold. So there's a few cases of concern for Minebrook in the summer downstream at the downstream site. And so let's take a look at the winter. So again, this is the mean chloride for the winter. So from like January to May, June-ish, late May. And so the trend is similar where the downstream site is higher, has higher chloride levels than the upstream. That just kind of corresponds with that table. And then when you look at the exceedances, so you still don't have any exceedances on the upstream site. Yay. But when you go look at the downstream site, which is downstream of I-495, you see a lot of exceedances. So thankfully, there's no acute exceedances because the light blue didn't go over this red line, but you do have a lot of chronic exceedances where from, like April to basically late May, it's all above that chronic threshold. So that is of concern to us. Okay, and then the other site that we'll briefly look at is Louderbrook. And so instead of red triangles, there's just these like little blue dots from Google Maps. So this was the upstream site in Westwood. And then the downstream site was in Dedham over here. It was actually very close to Barnes Memorial Park, if anyone's familiar with the Dedham area. And so the major road crossing was a few, but the main one was I-95. Okay, so in this case, we're gonna just look at chloride. And so similar, chloride downstream was higher than the upstream site. And these are the corresponding mean chloride levels for the whole site. And then when you look at the exceedances, you have, I'm only showing one graph because all the data is together. We didn't break it up into winter and summer this time. So in the upstream site, you have quite a bit of chronic exceedances because the blue line is over this orange one for a decent amount of time. And then for the downstream site, you have both acute and chronic exceedances. And I think I do want to just emphasize the y-axis here between the two graphs. So you've got 250, 500, 750 milligrams. And then on the downstream one, you start at 1,000, 2,000. So it is much higher than the upstream site. So yes, these are going to be some hotspots that we look at some more. Um, but yeah, that is just some of the data that we've been collecting the last few years. So in our research, in addition to collecting actual conductivity data, we have also been looking into alternatives and possible tools that we can use or adopt in our watershed, because that is the goal. It's like, okay, now we know that there is, high chloride levels. What can we do to change that? Salt brine is a big alternative that we're going to talk about, and there's a few others that we'll touch on. So first off, salt brine, what is it? So basically salt brine is just dissolved rock salt or like sodium chloride in water. So best practice is that it's 23% salt to 77% water. And this solution is ideal because it only freezes at -6 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty low. Brine is also more cost effective. You can either purchase brine or you can actually make your own. So Mass DCR actually has a really cool video on their YouTube page where they teach you how to make your own salt brine if you want to. But yeah, so it's cheaper because it's literally just salt and water. Um, and you do cut down the amount of salt because it is more water than salt, but it still has the efficacy that you want. Um, okay, so I'm not going to go through everything, but just really quickly, the reason that this works is because um, in terms of the freeze point of -6 degrees Fahrenheit, adding more salt doesn't actually make it where you can lower the freezing point. Um, the key thing is that you're just reducing the amount that you use, which saves you money on actual salt because you do have to buy salt to make brine. And then a key thing that there's a big kind of misconception between anti-icing and de-icing. So brine actually falls in anti-icing, which is if you put brine down first, then you're already doing you're like proactively making sure that the snow and the ice doesn't stick to the impervious surface, whether that's the road or sidewalk, etc. Versus if you put down road salt, it actually needs to dissolve in water for it actually to work. Other than like traction, I mean, the traction helps so that you don't fall in some cases, but it doesn't actually prevent the snow and the ice from binding to the impervious surface. So brine is actually a step above road salt because it's activates immediately instead of like when it starts mixing with the snow or ice once it starts snowing. Okay, and then we wanted to point out a community in our watershed who has actually started to implement salt brine. So they realized that their groundwater wells were showing really high sodium levels in 2024. And so they were like, okay, we need to start using less road salt because that's where the contamination was happening. So um, they basically switched from using sand or road salt, and now they use predominantly salt brine mixed with beet juice, and they pre-apply. So this is all before the snow actually lands. And so they focus more on like high traffic areas versus every single road, which does help with time and capacity. Um, and the other big thing is that they have equipment that is properly calibrated so that the amount of brine and the levels of salt and water in the brine are consistent. Okay, so far, what we've seen that the most challenging part of switching over from using road salt to brine, for example, is just the equipment. So, you know, you need slightly different equipment to apply brine versus just dumping road salt on the roads. But the cost of less salt that you're buying actually offsets over time the cost of the equipment. Um, and like the other big thing is that with any road management, training is key. And so we'll actually that kind of leads us into the next possible tool that we might be able to adopt in our watershed. Um, So, in our research, we came across a program that New Hampshire created called Green Snow Pro. And so it is basically a voluntary program where operators get certified and trained to apply um, road salt. Um, and the goal is to reduce the overall statewide road salt usage. So basically, each of these operators did a 1 day in-person training to learn better salt management practices. And so they get a license. There's both commercial and municipal options available as part of this program. But the key thing is that the program includes a limited liability protection for the operators. Because most of the time, the big concern is if someone falls, they might sue you if you don't put a lot of road salt down. Um, and so basically, it gives them protections so that if an injury is reported and they use the Snow Pro certification kind of protocols, that they have more protection. So someone can't actually be held liable for a fall. So that makes it so that they don't apply more salt just because um, you don't really need to, really. Okay. And so it's very brief. Let's see. Actually, that's great. Okay. So now we are gonna go into any questions. I did see something in the chat pop up while I was talking. I did also want to just throw in a couple of links that if you've never um, done any of this research, nice videos that are cool and entertaining. So the first one is the salt brine DCR video, and then the next one is actually a short film from Turnaround Films focusing on road salt, and it actually features one of our municipalities, Franklin. Okay, so Carly, do you want to moderate the questions or?
Yes, absolutely. So we have our first question here from Isabella. It says, is there more data to share about the benefit Franklin saw after the change, as well as the cost to transition?
That is a great question. I'm not sure if the representative from Franklin that registered is on the line and could provide more detail, but we actually do have a, a group that is going to be looking more into the cost side of things. We've really been focusing more on the science because that's our strengths. But there will be more information by uh, like November of this year in terms of like the cost to transition.
Great. And then we have one more question. Are there links to find out more information about the program for salt reduction?
Are there links to find out more about the program for salt reduction? Isabella, do you mean, feel free to unmute yourself if that helps. Do you mean like the salt reduction program from New Hampshire, or because DCR also has, like in Massachusetts, their um road salt reduction program that's more geared towards the Quabbin Reservoir, because that's like the main source of drinking water for Greater Boston. But yeah, if you could elaborate a little bit, that would be helpful.
Yeah, totally. Also, thank you so much for this presentation. It was really informative. And I am referring very specifically to, I think it was the New Hampshire case at the very end there, with the commercial versus municipal program that they have.
Yes. Let me find that link. Give me. I'll pop it in the chat.
And then we just had one more question, which was from Cam. Can you please post a link to your presentation? So I just want everyone to know we will be providing a link to the presentation slides and the meeting recording in a follow-up email after this. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to just throw them in the chat or unmute yourself.
I just put in the New Hampshire road salt reduction program webpage in the chat. And that has all the links to the Green Snow Pro certifications as well. Great. I'm so happy that there weren't clarifying questions about the graphs. Glad I explained it well. Okay. Well, so if there aren't any other questions for us about the presentation or like our chloride monitoring or anything like that, we'd love to get more feedback from you all. So I'm gonna actually, no, wait, there we go. Okay, so this kind of opens up into the discussion portion. In the registration, one of the questions was, is your town or city working on reducing road salt during the winter already? And some people said yes. And so we're just curious what is already being done, if you know. So feel free to write in the chat or you can unmute yourself, whatever is easiest. Oh, I just saw Amy's.
And I just have one more question, actually. I'll just read it. Do you have the protocols and equipment required for monitoring if the town wanted to monitor its own streams?
Yes. We do have a quality assurance project plan connected to our chloride monitoring program. So we can share that with you. I will just preface that the equipment is a bit on the expensive side. It's like $1,000 per logger. Um, so the other thing is, Amy, I mentioned, I see you're from Dover. We actually have monitored Trout Brook in Dover already. We didn't include it A for time, but also because it was not a problematic stream. But we are still hoping to, basically the goal of this program is to assess every single stream in our watershed. So if you have suggestions of other streams in Dover, that CRWA should take a look at. Feel free to write it in or email me. I'm gonna actually just put my email in the chat right now. Um, yes, we're still, this is an ongoing project for us. Yeah, and if anybody wants like the specific like protocols, you can also just email me. I think that would be a lot easier. I don't think I would be able to put in the files in this Zoom chat. They're too big. Okay, well, we can, I guess, move on into the other questions. I didn't mean to only focus on the first one. Um, but yeah, in terms of just like where you're coming from, whether you're a municipal staff or you're a community member, that um, I imagine you're more active considering that you're attending this webinar. Um, but yeah, if you think any alternatives would be easier for your community to adopt, or if there's any thoughts about challenges you face, or like I guess the one that we were thinking of, like it would be interesting to adopt the New Hampshire Green Snow Pro certification program in Massachusetts. Um, but yeah, we envision some obstacles, but we'd love to like get more feedback on, would that be like what others think. Again, we are not the experts. We're all just trying to work together. Isabella, by more locations, what do you mean by that?
I think just like more frequent and opportunities like throughout the watershed, um, for people to come together and kind of be walked through making some for their home. Like I think a lot of times, like maybe supporting the community and taking initiative can be the first step in them wanting to be more active and advocating for the city to take initiative too, in salt brine. But yeah, potentially like community organization partnerships to just have a season of we're making salt brine and this is how you do it. And here are maybe containers that people might need to have at home.
Yeah, that would be a great event for CRWA to host, I think. Maybe in partnership with DCR or municipality. Cool. Any other thoughts or questions? Thank you, Amy, for putting in the chat Fisher Brook as a possible monitoring site. There are many unnamed tributaries in our watershed. So that is super helpful. Thank you. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions or um, ideas, then I might just close us out. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Oh, I just saw Amy's chat. Yes, I think also there is that mentality that if it's not super plowed, that it's not safe. I think that that's one um, big piece of our advocacy is just educating the public more on like what, like how much road salt or brine like you actually need. Because I believe it's 1 tablespoon for every like 20 yards or something like that. It's something very small. Um, yeah. So, yeah, I think that's a mind shift that we'll have to work on with the public. It's like you don't need to see that much salt for it to be safe. Um, thank you, Cam, for your chat. I'm just gonna read it out loud for make sure everyone's following. It would seem that paying attention to which roads are salted or brine may also be important. Yes, so that is something that is a little more challenging to get from each um, municipality because they have lots of roads that they work on. Um, in a perfect world, I think it would be like a giant map of where we get data from every municipality saying like, okay, do you salt this road at what like not frequency, but like at what volume of road salt? So like, is it 100 pounds or whatever 100 metric tons per lane mile or whatever, and then like just have a giant map that shows all of that color coded. um we'll see if we ever get there. Thank you, Cam, for your offer. I will definitely reach out to you.
All right. I think I'm gonna hit the recording now.